Ibrox, the interviews.
Hi, and welcome to This is Ibrox. My name's Thomas McIntyre, and I'm delighted to be joined by former Falkirk, Hearts, Everton, obviously most importantly Rangers player, Hall of Famer, David Weir. David, thanks so much for joining me.
No problem, nice to be here.
So I suppose, I don't think we're quite out of it yet, so it's still the starting question, isn't it? How's COVID-19 and lockdown been treating you? Specifically, though, I'm quite interested how it's been treating your current role at Brighton.
Yeah, it's changed it. Obviously, I do a lot of travelling in my role now. I look after the loan players at Brighton, and we've got players all over the world, really. So usually I'm on planes and trains and automobiles and just getting around the world to see the players and watch the games and stuff. But obviously in this period, it's been more home-based and more stuff on video. So a lot of the games stopped for a period of time and then started to get going again. And Germany kind of kept going. And then some other leagues, again, the Championship and the English League started again. So it was just keeping in touch with the players and watching the games and just try to help them in whichever way I can, both on and off the field. You know, obviously the virus affected a lot of things, and the initial impacts to the players' safety and making sure they're all right in terms of where they are and they've got everything they need, and then also from a football standpoint as well, just making sure they had all they needed in that front as well.
Yeah, it's quite obviously a challenging time anyway, but challenging for players who are particularly younger players who are out in foreign countries and maybe looking for that kind of grounding back to their home club and stuff like that. It's quite an interesting parallel to an extent, I suppose, with you, and something I wasn't completely aware of before I started looking at you in depth for this interview. But you are transitioning over to America first. When you were, starting out your career, and I'm quite interested in the fact that, you go out there really young age, and this would have been, well, it'd be interesting to hear from you, but certainly for the majority of European clubs, this would have been well before there was liaisons and people at clubs to help you bed into a foreign environment and stuff like that. Yeah. So I'm wondering what your take on that, or was America further ahead in that type of thing?
No, not really, to be honest. I mean, I was thrown at the deep end, and obviously probably the opposite end of where what we try and do with the guys now, and there is benefit of standing on your own 2 feet and learning quickly. And I mean, I went to America when I was 18 to try and study and play football because it offered me the chance to do both, and I probably wasn't particularly good at either individually, so couldn't do either back at home. So it just gave me an opportunity to do both and progress on both fronts. So to put it in context, I'd never been abroad before. I'd never been in a plane before. I'd obviously never been to America before, and it just basically landed in, it was St. Louis, but I had to go via New York, Detroit, then St. Louis, and it was still a 3-hour drive to where I was going in Indiana. So I had to meet a couple of lads who were on the team who picked me up in St. Louis. I'd never met before. Had a bit of disaster again, a long story with the travel. So it just makes you grow up, and it makes you kind of become a wee bit more worldly wise, and I was the opposite of that. So very quickly you got to stand on your own 2 feet, whereas now in terms of our guys, when they go abroad and go to different places, usually they're a wee bit more well versed in that, and we obviously support them. And whereas back in the day, like I said, my experience was pretty much get on with it and see how you progress. Fortunately, I was surrounded by good people who helped me, and but there was definitely a few difficult days and a few difficult calls back home, just kind of, when you're having tough times. But that's the making of you, and I wouldn't change it for the world.
Did the local players, let's say, since you were coming from, let's say, a dyed-in-the-wool football country, and you're coming from Europe and all that type of thing, did they look to you in a slightly different way, expecting you to be further ahead in the progression or to be able to lead that team? And I suppose the second part of that question would be, did that change the way that you went about your game? Is that something that you carried with you through your career?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think they do. I think the Americans, they do sort of think of the British as being sort of where football started, along with some other European countries, obviously. So they do listen, hang off every word you say, and they do ask for your opinion in a lot of respects. And I probably wasn't used to that. And all of a sudden you go from being, a younger guy to being somebody who they listen to. So that was beneficial to me, and I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that responsibility, and I was lucky I went to university where the team was good and the football was good, the level was really good, and it was just a great level for me at the time, and I really enjoyed that challenge, both, as you say, off the pitch and also on the pitch where it was competitive, and we had a chance of doing something good and doing something special. So they did, they valued you, they listened to you. It was a very professional environment. It was an amateur environment, but conducted in a professional manner. So you had to budget your time around but your schoolwork as well as your training and all the things that go with that. So it was tough, but it was great fun. You know, a bunch of 17, 18 to 22, 23-year-olds, you know, traveling all over the country. We went, you know, every corner of America. We had a lot of fun. We had a lot of good times, and we also took the football pretty seriously. So it was a great start to what turned out to be quite a long football career for me.
Yeah, 17 to 22-year-olds driving about America, stopping off playing football. Sounds like there'll be no good stories that you've got in your memory there, but we'll maybe touch on that at another point in time. But interesting point about amateur, but with professional standards. That's pretty much how we're running this podcast at the moment as well. So I'm just, I suppose, the final question before I move on and bring you back into Europe. What did you major and minor in?
It was like a broad degree. It was communications with marketing was my actual degree. And if I'm being honest, the degree, I mean, I've done a lot of education since, I must admit, because it kind of lit the torch paper for me in terms of education. So even at the clubs I've been at, I've done different courses, and I've just actually finished my masters now and at Manchester Met. So I've kind of always had, when I could, tried to get a bit of education alongside my football. So my initial degree was communications and marketing, but I've probably got better as I've got older, to be honest, in terms of how I did and how much I applied myself to my education. But back in the day, you just tried to get by with a minimum and concentrated on the football. That was kind of definitely my idea around the education at the time. But I got my degree. I got a 3.0. It's a different scale there, so it's between 2's a pass, 4's like as high as you can get, so 3's pretty decent. So that's where I was. I wasn't a great student, but I wasn't a bad one.
Well, you take that every day of the week. I look forward to your critique notes from a communications point of view on this interview once we're finished.
A long time ago, I think they're long gone.
So I pressed the fast forward button then, and you're coming back. So just take me into that. Was the expectation for you, did you want to stay in America? Were there offers there, or was it a case of, no, I desperately want to get back because I want to ply my trade in Europe and stuff like that?
It was funny, to be honest, because I probably would have said I loved it, like I said, and we were successful, and I personally have done well over there as well. So the only problem was, you know, bearing in mind this is back early 90s, there was no professional outdoor league at the time, so it was an indoor league they had, and I wasn't suited to indoor football, you know, for obvious reasons. So I played in what was called the Senior Bowl, which was all the best senior players. So the players who were in their last year eligibility played in the Senior Bowl, and they basically had a draft and picked the best players, which is the American system for the clubs. But that was never going to float my boat. I didn't want to play 5-a-side, 6-a-side, or whatever it was in arenas and stuff. So the only real way that I could be a professional footballer in my eyes, of what I consider professional football, was to come back to the UK. So I wrote to a lot of clubs when I was out there, and I got the opportunity to have a few trials at different clubs, to be honest, primarily in England. And then my plan was to come back home to Falkirk and then get myself fit or in decent shape to go on trial and just kind of try and find a club at whatever level I could. And Leeds were one of the clubs that offered me a trial. So that was the one I kind of based my summer around, going to Leeds. And when I came back, you know, you finish in sort of May, pre-season started back in the day in July, and I had a couple of months at home. While I was at home, I was just keeping myself fit. And my dad was actually, I think, just getting sick of having me around the house. So he actually contacted Falkirk, my local club, and said, my son's back home. A bit of background says, would it be all right to come in and train? I didn't know anything about this. So my dad organised that. One of the scouts at Falkirk remembered me from my school days in Falkirk when I was an okay player as well. So he said, yeah, come in. Jim Jeffries obviously authorised it, who was the manager at the time. And I just turned up at Falkirk, basically on a Monday morning with my boots, and as they started pre-season, which was a wee bit earlier. So I was in the dressing room with the younger lads, so the scholars and the young pros, so similar sort of ages what I'd been used to. And the first team players changed in the home dressing room. We were in the away dressing room and just cracked on. It was a big group because it was pre-season. It was maybe 30 players. And we just started running and played a bit of football. And that was just a great environment for me. And within a couple of weeks, Jim Jeffries had offered me a contract. So I had the decision to make whether to take that contract at Falkirk or go on trial to the clubs that had the opportunity to do that down in England. And I just felt like I was really enjoying it. I was surrounded with, I had an opportunity to be a professional, so I couldn't really risk giving that up. So I decided to sign the contract at Falkirk, and very quickly, well, not very quickly, a couple of months after that, it was in the days where he used to play in the reserves on. So Falkirk were playing Aberdeen, Falkirk were in the Premier League, they were playing Aberdeen at Brockville at the time. The reserves would play at Pittodrie. That's kind of how it worked. So for me, it was brilliant. I was in the reserves to start. I was playing Peter Godfrey, who was a really experienced player. I was playing centre-back with Peter Godfrey, and I was having the time of my life. You know, I was earning peanuts, really, in terms of football player wages, but I loved every minute of it, and I was getting great experience. And then I think it was September, October, maybe about a month in, Falkirk had a couple of injuries. John Hughes and Joe McLaughlin, who were the centre-backs, got injured, and that Jim Jeffries threw me in the team against Dundee United for my debut, and that was me off and running. I never really came out of the team after that, and so that was me starting. And it was just like you say, just getting that opportunity and a wee bit of luck and being in the right place at the right time, and that was me up and running.
So I mean, and I'm sure we'll touch on maybe Jim Jeffries and Billy Brown being a slightly different coaching experience that you may be used to from your time in the States. But one of the things I really liked about you when you were a player at Everton and Rangers latterly as well, and we'll touch on all that, but it also kind of comes out in the research. You strike me as the type of person, you know, going to America, coming back, taking the chance that's in front of you instead of hanging on for Leeds, and then some of the later things. I get the feeling that you've always been fairly comfortable taking the risks because you're betting on your ability. Is it fair to say that you've got that strong belief?
I think you've got to, you know, in terms, you've got to believe in yourself. You also got to do what you think's right at the time. I mean, when that American opportunity came up for me, I just knew it was right. It wasn't you know, it's not perfect, it's not on your doorstep, but I just knew it was the right thing for me at the time. And, you know, wind on 20 years, whatever it was, when the Rangers opportunity came up for me, I knew it was the right thing. And then prior to that, the Everton thing, when I was at Hearts, came up, I knew that was the right thing and I wanted to do it. So I think when I make my mind up, I'm quite sure about it. I know myself, I think, which is always really important. I think you know what you are yourself, and you know what gives you the best chance of being successful. And within that as well, I've had opportunities to do other things that I've never felt was quite right. So, and usually your gut instinct, I mean, Walter used to always say that as well. I've heard Walter present and just talking to him, and he always talked about, you know, you can have all the theories in the world and do this and that, and, you know, the best advice in the world, but ultimately your gut is usually the best way of deciding things. And that's definitely the case with me. You know, your instinct and your gut is usually the one you should follow, and usually the one that gets you into the right place.
Definitely, yeah, wise words to stand by. Although I'm beholden to ask, what's the one, as you look back over the career, what's the one where you think it got away, that you should have taken the chance but maybe you didn't? What's the one that keeps you up at night?
I
can't be doing this interview, by the way,
right? I genuinely couldn't. I mean, you talk about Leeds back in the day. At that time, you know, going and doing something like that, but I genuinely wouldn't change anything in my career at all, football-wise. In terms of, I played for my local team, Falkirk. I went to America, had unbelievable experience. Went to some unbelievable places, and, you know, met some great people that I'm still, you know, are still my best friends now. I played for my local team, which was great. I used to go and watch Falkirk when I couldn't get through to watch Rangers, or I didn't have the opportunity to get to watch Rangers. So I played for them. I played for Hearts, which was, my dad used to go and watch Hearts when he was younger, and always spoke about the Dave Mackays and people like that. So I got that great experience winning the cup there as well, and doing things like that. And then got the opportunity to play in England, which was a dream of mine. Everton, a great club. I had 8 years there. You know, I couldn't have picked a better club. I genuinely couldn't. So, you know, I've got no regrets there. And then when I'm 36, getting on 37, I get the chance to play for the team I supported. So, and then you throw in a lot of Scotland caps and the World Cup and a UEFA Cup final and European trips with Hearts and Rangers and Everton, then, I mean, I genuinely wouldn't have changed any of it, you know. And I know I'm not trying to be say it was all great and it was all good and every moment was fantastic, because it wasn't. But, you know, I genuinely, if I could go back and make a different move or make a different choice, then I'm not sure it could have worked out much better.
Yeah, it's certainly a heavy CV. Let's put it that way. So I'm just interested as well. Jim Jeffries, Billy Brown. There's obviously a good relationship there because we'll come back to them at Hearts as well. But was there a massive change for you? So you'd went out to America. The guys are looking at you as, well, there's this person come from Europe. There's a glamour to that. Then you're getting back into Falkirk. Well, this guy's come from America. There's a bit of glamour to you as well. But Jim Jeffries, Billy Brown, I'm just interested in that relationship because it's one that kind of runs through really the starting period and into the Hearts period of your career. Mm-hmm. What were they like as a partnership, and was it a massive difference to what you were used to?
No, really. Like, it was very relaxed. It was, I mean, they were the boss, don't get me wrong, and I was always respectful of that throughout my career. The manager's the manager, and manager's, God in terms of how a football club runs that. And it's the same at college in America. The coach was the coach, and whatever he said went. Don't get me wrong, you bend the rules and push the rules as and when, but that was just how I was. So I was very much of the mindset, and so were they, that you had to have fun in your day-to-day work, and that usually got you the best results. There had to be discipline, there had to be rules, and there had to be things that were done for the benefit of the team. But ultimately, it was about enjoying what you were doing, working hard, which is important, being fit, and putting the team above yourself. And that, it wasn't complicated. If you were told or you were asked to do a certain job, if you didn't do it or you chose to do something else, then you wouldn't bother. That's how Jimmy and Billy operated, and they were very upfront about telling you. There was no grey areas. It was black and white. This is what we ask you to do. This is what we expect. Just do it. And it was very simple. I think now, if anything, and being a coach or having been a coach, we can overcomplicate it and we can try and do everything for everybody. Whereas if you get the right people and you give them trust and you give them an opportunity, which is often the hardest thing, then usually they repay you if you treat them well and you've got a good relationship with them and they understand what you want from them, being clear in terms of what you want. And then if they don't do it, then you've got a problem. If they do it, then you give them a pat on the back.
Yeah, and I agree with you. From the outside, it always seems to me that as football's matured, let's say, more and more responsibility's been taken away from the players because of all these things that be done for them, and there's teams to do X and teams to do Y for them. Sometimes it's just a case of, look, you need to do your job. You need to come in, take on board the message, and just do the very best you can because that's what you're responsible for. Yeah. So I'm interested in some 92 to 96. You're in that Falkirk team. I think it's 133 appearances or something like that. It struck me, obviously, Jim and Billy left prior to you. It looked like Falkirk, and you were maybe a signal of this when you were leaving as well. Falkirk were clearly in decline at that point in time.
Yeah, I mean, Billy and Jim had overachieved with Falkirk. We were competing at the top end of the table. We beat Celtic, we beat Rangers at Ibrox. And
let's not dwell on that one.
We were a really good team with some really good players, and Billy and Jim had really progressed the club and done well themselves personally and brought a lot of good players to the club. But me, and probably, I'm not sure about them. Me, I'd stayed too long. I should have moved earlier. There was no doubt about that. And things didn't come off for whatever reason to the things that potentially might have happened. And that was frustrating for me. And I probably went off track a wee bit. That was a real dangerous point looking back at my career, whereas I could have kind of drifted and ended up at that level or below, and throughout my career. So when Jim and Billy left to go to Hearts, that was a perfect opportunity for me to leave. They knew me, they trusted me, they brought me in again, they gave me an opportunity which was right for me at the time. So I went into an environment I knew, they knew what they were getting, and it just worked. So, the 4 years at Falkirk, as you said, Falkirk started to kind of decline a little bit. They changed manager pretty regularly. They didn't want Jim and Billy to go. Jim, obviously, after a long process, did go, and they started to be successful where they were. So it was probably a natural progression for them, and my progression was probably delayed a wee bit, maybe a year or two. I should have left a year or two earlier, but I was enjoying it so much with them that I didn't necessarily want to leave. And then when they left, I probably couldn't wait to leave, and the right thing never came up. So when they went there, it was a perfect opportunity for me to go and have a new challenge. I was still relatively early in my career, 3-4 years in, so I was still learning, and I thought that was a good step for me. It wasn't a step too far. It wasn't too big a club, and I thought I'd get in the team and play, and I thought the team could be successful as well.
Yeah, it's like you said, making that progression, and obviously Jim and Billy and being delighted to beat Hibs to the punch as well. Obviously chasing you. Am I right in thinking maybe this is some of the rumour factory? So that both Rangers and Celtic were sniffing round about you at that point as well, even
I
on
don't know
a
so much
normal
about
basis.
Celtic. Rangers definitely were. I know, like Rangers had a couple of bids rejected for me, and that was really difficult for me at the time. There was a couple of things going on, and I think Falkirk asked for too much money, and that was really difficult for me when I was young, because I was really keen to do that for obvious reasons. And there was another couple of things as well, and in terms of English clubs, that I went to Liverpool and I was down there for a couple of weeks, and never quite came through. And then there was other clubs I met and spoke to, and it just, with experience, you realise that these things don't always happen. But it was really disappointing for me at the time, and I probably thought, where's this going to go? Am I going to get to where I want to get to? And then, so that probably set me back, if I'm being honest. So that led to what happened. And as you say, I had opportunities at Hibs and Hearts and Aberdeen at the time, and I just felt like Hearts gave me the best opportunity to go and progress and get better, and be in an environment that would have given me a chance without knowing as much about the other ones as I did about the people at Hearts.
Just a quick question in that then. So obviously you're saying there that maybe put you back a little bit, and it maybe weighed on your mind, these things, the disappointments not coming off, going to Liverpool, the Rangers thing, stuff like that. I'm just wondering, and you tell me if I picked you up wrong here, but what's it like when a player starts to become disengaged from the club? Because it sounds to me as if, certainly for a period there, you were disengaged with the back end of the Falkirk relationship.
Yeah.
What does that look like in the day-to-day? Do you just not train as hard? Do you not go through the wall?
Well, you do train as hard, and you remain professional, but it's hard. It's your relationship with the manager ultimately. I think you always remain your personal pride and your standards and what you do. But if you've not got that dynamic with the manager, I think it's sometimes that 5-10% can affect you, and you can see you're not quite the same player. You don't have that wee extra edge that you need to be at your best. That certain motivation that kind of gets you to the level you need to be at your best. So it's not a conscious thing a lot of the time. You don't try any less, or you don't not want to win or apply yourself in the right manner. That never leaves you. But I just think probably unconsciously you're not quite at your best, and maybe from the outside looking in, people can just see that that edge is missing, and it's a really hard thing to measure and a really hard thing to put your finger on. But it's just these fine margins and fine lines, and just your mentality within that, I think, that has a real impact on your performance, and ultimately again that probably stops you getting to where you want to be, because you're maybe not showing yourself to to your true level.
Yeah, okay. So press the fast forward button again then. You're into Hearts, 96 to 99, that's 76 appearances. That Hearts team, I think it's probably fair to say, really, really shone. And you've some really, really talented people in there. The Scottish Ronaldinho and Stevie Fulton and stuff like that. And then guys like Neil McCann. It seemed like Jim Jeffries and Billy Brown had built a really good internal culture there. Everybody was pulling their weight, and I've seen obviously interviews with people like Neil McCann and stuff like that as well. And it came across on the pitch, maybe not in the game at Ibrox where you maybe went down to 8 men and stuff like that, which is a crazy game, which is interesting to get your view on that. But it seemed to be that you fully believed that you could go and win a lot of stuff in Scotland, and by and large, we won a few trophies. But there's a lot there I'm asking, but I'm wondering how sad it was when that team started to get broken up as well.
I think, again, to be honest, to answer your last question first, probably as the team broke up, it was a natural thing. Sort of Colin, Cameron, Neil McCann, myself. Gary Locke got injured, unfortunately for him. He would have been another one. Paul Ritchie, that the younger players probably, were doing well enough that other clubs started to come looking, and we won the cup, which was obviously a big thing for Hearts, because we went into Hearts when Hearts were renowned for not winning things and falling at the final hurdle, and that was, what a big monumental moment, winning that cup and getting that monkey off our back. So that seemed like a natural time to leave for a lot of people, because we'd done what we'd done. But I mean, we're also very close in the league with Rangers and Celtic prior to that as well. So it was a real competitive team, a really good team, and without having the stats, to hand. Throughout the season, we were right in amongst it. We were second a lot of the time, and then I think eventually we finished third, but not by a great margin. And we genuinely felt like we had a chance in the league and obviously in the cups as well. We played Rangers in a cup, the Gaza final, where he just ran riot in the second half, and we were very competitive. And obviously we beat Rangers in the cup final as well, which was a great moment for the club. So that seemed like the natural time to leave. And I'd been there, as you said, 70 odd games. It feels like longer. And I had a great time and a great opportunity, and it was real part to be, it was real good to be part of that. And then, but again, like I said, I was 27, 28, so I was probably thinking, right, it's now or never for me to get to England to go to the next stage. And I'd got into the international team in that time. I'd just been to the World Cup, so I was kind of going in that direction, and I was just ready for the next step. So I was, again, Rangers were linked, and there was a couple of conversations about that potentially happening, but never. And Walter had gone down to Everton, so when he got in touch, and that seemed like it was a chance of it happening. And I was running out of contract at Hearts, so this was I probably had 3 or 4 months left in my contract, so Hearts' money was diminishing in terms of what I was valued at. So I was a bit stronger in terms of being able to make that happen. So I'd made my mind up I wanted to go, and when Everton came in, I really pushed it again to try and get out. And often that's the case when it's the right time to leave, and sometimes you can do it in the wrong manner, and players can kind of over egg that. But I tried to be respectful of Hearts, but also be making them aware that I thought it was my time to leave. And I think it worked well for both of us in terms of the club had been successful, and I was probably ready for the next stage.
Just a question in there. It's just purely because we touched on your boyhood Rangers fan, stuff like that. And I know obviously a consummate professional, and you've won the cup. It's sort of an end of an era for Walter Smith and Rangers, that type of way. Being a kind of boyhood Rangers fan, and you're looking at was there a moment where you're thinking, I've just beaten my boyhood team, and there's their fans of which I'm sort of one trudging away. I'm really not comfortable talking about that day at all, to be honest with you. But does it flash through your mind, or are you just wrapped up in the moment that you're a professional and you've got your hands on the silverware because that's your job to do that?
And I think as soon as you become a professional footballer, and I can only talk about myself, obviously, those kind of things go out the window. I've always have and always will be a Rangers fan in terms of when I'm watching a game, I want them to win, and that never leaves you. But when you're playing against Rangers or Celtic, you want to beat them. It doesn't matter who you support. You want to win for yourself. You want to show you're better than the player in your position. You want to win for your teammates and the club you're working for, and you want the bonus that's attached to the game as well. Let's be honest. We all work for a living, so there's different dynamics. As soon as you become a professional football player, then you become selfish in terms of your career and your nature. Your competitive nature makes you want to win the game. And it makes me laugh when people talk, oh, he is a Rangers or Celtic fan and he'll not be trying or whatever. It's just not the case. Or even managers or coaches or whatever. You want to win every game. You want that for your personal pride. You'll be the same in terms of what you do. You want to do it as well as you can every time you do it. And and when you're a football player, that is undoubtedly the case. So it never entered my head that all I wanted to do was win the cup for Hearts. That's genuinely the reason. And I know, the Rangers players would have been exactly the same, whether they grew up supporting whoever it may be. They wanted to win the cup for the club they played for. That's just the nature of the game, and your competitive sort of juices get running with that, and that overrides everything in my experience.
So I'm wondering then what the conversation looked like, and why Everton? Because I'm sure there would have been a couple of clubs down south as well looking at you. Were there multiple offers, and then you chose Everton? What sold you on them?
There was different opportunities at different times, but it's like I said earlier, it's about you having the power to actually, or you and your advisor, whatever it is, having the power to enable it to happen, and the likelihood of it happening in terms of suiting both clubs. So Everton came up at the right time, I think, in that regard. And it was a natural kind of break at that time. And I kind of forced it with Jim in terms of saying, with Jim, I have ultimate respect for him, still have and still speak to him, and he's, been a massive part of my career, but I knew it was the right time to leave. So when I have that conversation with him, it's hard for somebody to go back on that. And it's not an easy conversation to have, but I'm an honest person. I couldn't lie in terms of how I was feeling and what I was thinking and why I thought it was the right time to go. So I had that conversation with him face to face and just told him that I wanted to go. I thought it was a great opportunity for me. I might not get many more opportunities to go to England. And I was quite upfront about that. And Jim, he wasn't happy, I can't deny that, but I think he understood. And he just wanted it to be fair for the club, because his job was to look after the club. And I like to think he had a bit of respect for me as a person, but ultimately his job's going to be the club and doing what's best for the club.
So you go into Everton then, and let's say you're a fully formed centre-back at that point in time. You know, you've been through a couple of different clubs, you've made some difficult decisions, you've got there. I'm wondering what it was like going into that club in terms of the characters in the dressing room. Was it an easy place to go into, or there was obviously lots happening at the club as well, or was it just a challenging place to be right from the offer? Was there just good times first?
No, it was challenging. I went into a relegation battle, to be honest. That was the situation. And Everton had never been relegated for the Premier League. So straight away, I'm going in sort of February, March time, I think it was. And Everton have got to stay in the league. And Walter's taken on this job. It's his first season. There's a lot of things been going on at the club, a lot of things off the field. And I probably wasn't aware of that when I joined the club. And then you go in and there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of negativity about the club. So I went in my first game. We won 5-0 against Middlesbrough. And I'm like, this is easy. This is great. You know, but very quickly reality kicked in, and we were right in the midst of the relegation battle, and we probably were for the season after as well, just by the nature of where we were at that time. There was players coming in, good players coming in, but then immediately they seemed to go back out. So there was no real stability around about the club. And as a result, you know, the club never really progressed. It was the fans are so passionate, the fans care so much about their club, and, you know, obviously being in and around the relegation places, you didn't want to be part of the first team to get relegated by Everton. So there was a lot of stress associated with that. But players are players, you know, and I quickly realised that in my career, whether you're at Falkirk or in the Premier League with Everton, people are people. So people treat you how you treat them. And, you know, no matter what they've got or where they've come from, genuinely, people sort of, they judge you on your football abilities and how you are as a person. That's kind of how it works. So I was happy with that. I was just myself, went in and tried to do as well as I could on the training pitch, gave my all in the games, and then just tried to be a decent person off the pitch and tried to interact with guys and speak to people, and, you know, and just be a normal person. And that's very quickly within football, you realise that that's the case. If you go in with any kind of baggage or any kind of expectations, then very quickly I think you can be in a difficult position.
Yeah, pretty wise words for any walk of life. I'm interested then about your relationship with Walter at that period. So that's probably, you know, really cementing your relationship with him, and he's dealing with a lot of stuff going on in the background as well, and, you know, circumstances changing at boardroom level on a day-to-day basis from what we know. What was it that he brought to the club? I'm quite interested in terms of that dressing room, in terms of keeping players like yourself. People speak a lot about Walter's man management skills, and it sounds to me as though he gave people the space to just get on with getting the game. I'll deal with everything else in the background.
Yeah, and to be honest, I didn't take much managing. I wasn't difficult to manage. I wouldn't imagine I'm, for the reasons we just spoke about. I was pretty much get on my job and do the best I could, and like to think I could blend into pretty much any dressing room. But within that, you throw in the Gascoignes and the Gianolas and the Mark Hugheses and, you know, John Collinses and Richard Goffs and Marco Materazzis, Oliver Decore, and, you know, that then there's a different dynamic, and that's where Walter was obviously very good in terms of his man management. And I mean, I got to know Walter better obviously later, and, you know, and at the time I was going in, I was in awe of Walter. Walter was the greatest, one of the greatest, if not the greatest Rangers manager ever. He was one of my heroes, so I'm going in to work for him. So that's my starting point, and that's genuinely how I was for the first, well, pretty much the whole time I was there. And so I never had that relationship with him whereby other than manager and player, and so that's kind of how it was with me and him. I was very respectful of him and Archie and the staff, and just wanted to do well, and I was really grateful for the opportunity to get down and play for Everton. So that was kind of how my relationship was. But the relationships I had with the people I've mentioned, and Duncan Ferguson and Kevin Campbell and all the other guys who were there, who were probably bigger profiles and bigger personalities and bigger, sort of had to interact with them more and deal with them more, and probably more issues with them, then, you know, he was very good at it. But it was probably, and again, this is all stuff we found out afterwards, the stuff he was dealing with off the pitch probably made that really difficult to actually be a manager or be a coach as much as he would have liked to, because I think he was dealing with things off the field. Everton was a very troubled club at the time. There was a lot of issues in terms of the finances and the off-field issues that were impacting the on-field issues, and it became a very difficult job for him. And ultimately, he left. Which for me was a real sad day for me, in terms of me feeling responsible to a degree for being part of that, for him losing his job at Everton. And I know he knew it was the right club at the wrong time. I think that was kind of his thoughts latterly, and he jumped in probably too quick when he left Rangers. He probably should have had a time out, but I felt terrible about that. One of my heroes, and he's losing his job, and I felt partly responsible for that.
Well, before I move on to the Moyes era, then, because obviously you're there, 1990-07, I do have to ask, even though it was on an interim basis, was it surprising to see Duncan Ferguson on the touchline as the manager of Everton? Is that something you ever thought you would see?
Yeah, I did, and I know Duncan well, and I speak to Duncan, regularly, and I think he'll be a manager. And if I'm being honest, I thought he had a chance of being manager the last time because of how he did. And like I've seen him coach. When I went back to Everton as 23s coach, and Duncan came in the 18s, he's very good. People got this perception of Duncan as being some kind of, I don't know what the right word is, but we've all got that perception. A lot of people have got that perception, where he's very far removed from that. He's got good information. He's very passionate, which is obvious for all to see. And he's got good information. And he's learned for the best. He's been in around some top managers now. So he's had some great experience, and he's got some really strong ideas. And he's as good as any, as I've seen in the dressing room, in terms of motivating people and also putting his thoughts into words in terms of what he thinks and what he wants you to do, and simplifying things as well. So I wasn't surprised. And if anything, he did really well. I think he changed the whole dynamic of that club within a week to 10 days, which is not easy to do. And he got some results when they were really struggling. So other than Everton, I think back in now, in terms of the quality person they brought in terms of Carlo Ancelotti, you really can't get much better and bigger than if they weren't able to attract that calibre of person. And I think Duncan would have been in a really strong position to get that job.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes lazy shorthand that people can just take a perception from a snapshot in time from decades ago, and they use that to inform what they think. He certainly knows his stuff, or he wouldn't have been in that position anyway. So I'm quite interested then. Walter unfortunately goes out the door, and there's those feelings you're speaking about there in terms of, have I let somebody down, and we're part of the squad that's led to that. There's obviously all the fires in the background at boardroom level. In comes David Moyes. Is there a sea change immediately, or was it a gradual change of coaching, etc., and philosophy from him, or did he change everything overnight?
It was pretty quick change, and he was very similar but very different to Walter, if that makes sense, in terms of same in the background, same in terms of his beliefs, his fundamentals, in terms of how he should act and what was right and what was wrong. But he was different in terms of how he managed. He was definitely hands-on on the field, younger and coach driven, whereas Walter was probably more in the background and side of the pitch, and come in at times and very good in the dressing room at half-time before games, whereas David Moyes was hands-on all the time. So it was very different in that regard in terms of how they worked, and he did implement a lot of things. He changed a lot of things in terms of how he wanted to work. He definitely pushed the standards up in terms of what he wanted and what he asked for from the club, in terms of how we travelled, where we stayed and things like that. And I think a new manager gets that opportunity. I think you get, when you come in, you can strike while the iron's still hot, and he was his profile was good. He knocked back a few jobs in the past, so I think Everton felt they were lucky to get him, and he was obviously very enthusiastic and pushed for different things. So the players very quickly realised that he was going to push things off the pitch, and we had to respond as well on the pitch. And I was probably one of the older guard at that time, so there's probably 5 or 6 of us who were myself, Kev Kilban, Lee Carsley, Duncan, I think was there, Kevin Cap, people like that. I'm not sure exactly the dynamics, but it was an older group of players, and very quickly started to bring in younger, hungrier players that he felt needs to come into the group and challenge the older players as well. So that dynamic changed me. For always probably perceiving myself as being one of the younger players, I became one of the most senior players. So that became a different challenge for me, and I enjoyed it. And you were definitely out of your comfort zone in that regard as well. And he shook a few cages, he rattled a few cages, and he obviously, there was good and bad in his time at Everton in terms of where we finished in the league, and 1 or 2 seasons we had difficult times, and there was an evolution, probably, that at sometimes was revolution as well in terms of how it went about. So it was really interesting times, but he was very, very, very good in terms of his coaching and his information. And he impacted the club very quickly, and he had very strong beliefs in what he wanted to do and how he wanted to do it.
Yeah, like you say, an evolution, on the pitch, and more stability off the pitch as well in terms of the boardroom situation and finances of the club as well. It's quite insightful though, when a manager comes in like that and you're going from, let's say, you saw yourself as a younger player to an older senior standard setter, if you like. Do the managers, or have you seen this in different types of managers? Because I'd imagine it'd go one of two ways. Managers want to come in and they want to be seen as, perceived to be strong, and so they take immediate action against some of these senior players to show that I'm the man. Or was David Moyes the type to pull you, that group, Kevin Coban, etc., Duncan, aside and say, right, guys, this is what I really need, and I need you to buy into that? What did that look like?
It was. He had the individual conversations with us all initially, and just to get our feelings on it, and then basically said how he was going to work. And he did. He involved you, and he was the boss, as I said, and we were all very respectful of that. But it was very different in terms of how he managed it and what we were all used to, probably. So it was a bit of shake-up, and you had to toe the line because he was the manager, and probably sometimes you thought, this is not sure about this, but you had to do it because ultimately that was your responsibility, and that was your job. So it was a challenge at times, and I think he'll reflect on that period where he probably went maybe too far too quickly, and he had to adapt and kind of get the buy-in of the players more. And I think after maybe he had a good initial bit and then a difficult bit, and then after that I think it came to a sort of medium ground where it worked for everyone. And consistently Everton were doing well then. Consistently Everton were a top 8-6 team, and finished in fourth one season above Liverpool, got in the Champions League qualifiers and stuff like that. And even after that time, they were consistently in the top 4 or 5 as well, and getting to cup semi-finals, finals, and things like that. So there was a real stability and a real. He had his his fingerprints all over everything regarding the club, and it was a real team and club built on his identity. But like everything, it wasn't a straight line. There was ups and downs, but ultimately where he got it to was made the journey worth it.
Did you see some of that mirrored in his short stay at Man U?
I think he probably at Everton had that difficult time at the start, and Bill Kenwright, the owner, stuck by him and trusted him, believed in him, and then obviously at Man United he never got the time, and they changed very quickly. I think it was around about a year that he had there, which is to manage a club like that, and there'll be issues saying, oh, he upset this or he didn't do that or whatever by different people, but in that period of time you're turning around a cruise ship. You're not turning around a dinghy. It's got to move in another direction, whether they liked it or not. And there's probably been friction in terms of people who were fighting that as well, and that'd be really difficult. And I'm sure he didn't do everything 100% as he would have liked to have done on reflection, but you need time when you're a manager. You need time in terms of getting your people in, getting your beliefs in, and getting the club and the team going in the direction that you want it to go. And it's not a quick fix, undoubtedly. So
going in the direction you want to go, so to speak. We're in 2007. I think you've played over 30 odd games for Everton at this point. The phone rings, and take me into that when you first hear of Rangers being interested. Did Everton want you to stay on, or was this just a pure David Weir decision to say, right, my time at Everton's over?
No, I probably knew my time at Everton was coming to an end. Everton were signing centre-backs every season, and I mean every season when I was there. And I enjoyed that fight. I loved that challenge, and I think every club should do that. When your Rangers are doing it now, they're bringing in players and we're challenging the players they've got there, and that's how it should be, and that's how big clubs operate. And Everton were definitely doing that. And the centre-backs were gradually I don't know if they were getting better or I was getting worse, but I felt like the fight was getting harder. And I was 36, I think, when I left Everton. So I was still playing the Premier League regularly, 34, 35, 36. And I had opportunities to leave. And David Moyes said to me, look, I don't want you to leave. You're probably no first choice now. Says you're welcome here as long as you want to stay here, because I think you can help us, and I think you'll definitely play. You might not play as often as you like, but I'm not pushing you out the door. So I had loads of conversations with different clubs, West Brom, Stoke, Birmingham, managers and clubs, and I had opportunities to leave, and I just never came up with anything that made me want to leave. I was offered longer contracts, more money, throw the kitchen sink at you. Genuinely, looking back, it was crazy, and I just says, I'm not ready to leave here, and I'm not, as I said earlier, my gut instinct told me it wasn't right. So when the phone rang for Walter, and genuinely this is what it was like. I can remember where I was. I was at home on the couch. My phone rang. It was Walter. David, it's Walter. Would you like to come to Rangers? That's pretty much how the conversation was. And I was like, I'd love to come. He says, okay, I'll phone your manager. He probably already spoke to him, but he said, I'll phone the manager and we'll see how we go. And the next day, I'd gone into the training ground in Liverpool, I picked up my boots, and that day I was driving up to Glasgow. And that's kind of how it worked. Walter was only in the door a week, I think. I'd obviously gone back to play for him at Scotland previously, so I'd had an interaction. It wasn't my last interaction, wasn't at Everton, but I had a Scotland. He brought me back into the Scotland team after I'd had a couple of years out, so he brought me back in, and I think he was hoping that I could do a similar job at Rangers, just bring a bit of experience. And I was 36 going on 37, and I knew it was the perfect thing for me at the time. I went up on a 4 or 5 month contract, I think, at the end of the season. They just took over my contract at Everton. David Moyes says, do you want to go? I says, I want to go. We shook hands. I picked up my boots, and that was it.
So it's never a bad call to get at that age. And so, yeah, it was a short term initially. Was that discussed? Listen, it's only short term and you're essentially on trial and proving yourself. Or was there always the expectation you would sign a longer deal? And, if I'm being slightly more challenging, when the deal was announced, I think there was a large amount of people in the support and the Rangers support that scratched their head a little bit and said, okay, we know David Weir's a good defender, but is that David Weir was a good defender, or David Weir, can he still be? And I'm just wondering, was that all in your mind? And again, was it just a challenge to not only am I signing for Rangers and signing again for Walter, but I'm going to show everybody that I've still absolutely got it?
I wasn't worried about that. I had no doubts about that. Genuinely, I had no doubts. I knew he was a good player. I was still playing the Premier League, and I'm playing against good players week in, week out. I was still playing for my national team, so I knew it was good enough. I was never worried about that. And the noise that goes on around about Rangers, like, we all know how that goes. And if you read everything or worry about everything, then you're very quickly in a difficult place. So I couldn't wait to get my car up the road. I couldn't wait to get into Glasgow, and I couldn't wait to get playing. Rangers were struggling at the time, let's be honest, in terms of why were they struggling? Or the stuff I'd read was they couldn't win headers, they couldn't keep clean sheets, they were struggling to win games. So I'm thinking, well, I can help with that. I'm actually, that's probably some of the things I can still do. So lacked experience probably in those areas as well. So I just thought it ticks a lot of boxes for me. It wasn't rocket science. I was going to work for a manager that I knew would be a good environment. I knew Coiste, I knew some of the players that were there. So I knew it was going to be all right. And the job at the time was to finish second in the league. Celtic had pretty much won the league. We were fighting with Aberdeen to finish second, which enabled us to get into the Champions League qualifiers. So we went up short term. Well, I went up short term to try and finish second. We did that. We beat Celtic. We had some decent results and we finished pretty strongly. And then all of a sudden we knew coming into the next season, I wasn't expecting a new contract. I'd went up there to the end of the season. There was nothing spoken about, nothing discussed in terms of next year. And I had no expectations. But I knew if I did well, who knows, I might. But if I didn't, I still played for Rangers and I still had 6 months living the dream. So it was a win-win for me. And then probably even that, it was after the season, probably Walter says, do you fancy doing another year? And genuinely, that's what the conversation's like. And I was like, 100%. If you want me here, I'll be here. And signed the contract, probably reduced my wages again, as Walter usually did. And appearance money to try and get me on the pitch. But again, that suited me. So it was, the next job was to try and win the league. That's how it is at Rangers. That's how you start every season. And we'd made a bit of mark because we beat Celtic coming in. And now we had to make a bigger mark. And, that next season became an unbelievable season, as we all know, in terms of we didn't win the league, which ultimately is a failure. But we did pretty much everything else.
Oh, I think it's fair to say that you've hit some pretty high marks in that. Even the Rangers support can forgive the squad for not winning the league that particular season. It's quite interesting because there was a lot of similarities maybe to some of your time at Everton as there was at Rangers at that time. There was problems behind the scenes and was problems on the pitch. Some of them you referenced there in terms of the defence not being able to marshal itself to large degrees in some games, and I'm probably being as polite as I could be. I remember shouting it differently from the stands during the games, but we'll do that in a later one. I'm just interested then, because again it goes back to the thread that I was talking about in your career, type of David Weir, the person that you kind of jumps off the page when you're doing the research, that you've always taken the right but the tough decision. You've always been essentially a leader in the dressing room, and the character, and somebody that people are looking to. You're coming in at that age, fresh off the Premiership, still got the ability. Was there an immediate look to you in the dressing room to say, right, not only are you coming in to play games, but you're coming in to marshal that defence? Because it seemed to me that you were always doing that on the pitch as well, talking away to people, leading them through a game.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. I was at that stage in my career where that was probably natural for me, normal for me, and probably Rangers needed that. So that's why I knew, other than being Rangers and all the things that associate that with me, I knew it gave me a chance to go and do something. I knew the level would be fine. I knew I could play in Scotland at that time. I wasn't worried about me and I knew the players that were there. I knew there were some good players there. I mean, Barry was there, and different players were there. So I know there was a lot of good players there from my time at Scotland. So I knew we should have been doing better than what we were doing. So, and I knew Walter he knows the club better than anybody. So I knew he would very quickly give the team a chance. So, and they weren't as bad as what probably they looked previously. So I just wanted to be part of that. And what I was asked to do, I could do, which always helps. If you're going in, you're asked to do something you can't do, or you're not confident doing, then you've got a problem. But I genuinely never felt that, I was going to be asked to do something that I wasn't capable of doing. So very quickly I went in, I played my first game, I think it was at Dunfermline. We won 1-0, we kept a clean sheet. I played with Carl Svensson at the time, and I'm like, this kid isn't as bad as people say he is. He's okay, he's a decent player. He's maybe had a hard time, but he's not a bad player. So, all of a sudden the picture looked a wee bit brighter. I enjoyed it, and all of a sudden I was up and running, and I just enjoyed every day. Training was good, as it always is. With Walter, it was enjoyable, it was hard work, it was competitive, and very quickly I saw there were some players that could help us. I knew also, in my opinion, thought there was probably some who couldn't and wouldn't be there that long, knowing what I knew about Walter, but that's normal, that's football. I
think there was definitely some players, we're not going to list them all, but definitely some players who were not able to fill the particular jersey. So before I go into the 2008 season, I just need to ask you, you've been through all of that, you're at the latter end of your career, you've played the Premiership for a long time. What's it like walking through the doors, though, when you go to sign a contract, or walking through the doors when you're officially a Rangers player, that moment?
Yeah, but to be honest, I signed my contract at Murray Park. I think that was kind of how it was. It wasn't a big signing, it wasn't one of them press conferences or anything like that. I went up, signed my contract at Murray Park, and that was it. And I was up in training, and then the game was on the Saturday. I can't remember exactly the time, but the best things for me as a player, and when I was a coach there as well, it was driving up to Ibrox. I can remember going to Ibrox, watching games at Ibrox, and probably getting the train through for Falkirk, getting the tube out with my dad to the stadium, walking up to the stadium. We'd always get there early and watch the bus coming in and watch the players coming off the bus and things like that, and loving that experience. But as a player, obviously, we'd go in early. So you drive up to Ibrox, and just driving up to Ibrox that's a thrill for me. Just actually, bringing the car up, seeing the stadium, and then walking through the front door. Or sometimes we go on the track, but I love walking through the front door. There's nothing better. There's no better ground in the world in terms of walking through the front door and seeing that staircase and to actually being able to turn right rather than turn left as well. That was a thrill for me. So that very, very basic things and very sort of standard things, but just gave you a great feeling in terms of actually having the opportunity to do that. And I'm really grateful that I did get that opportunity to go and do that, and and be part of what was a relatively successful time for us there.
So yeah, I've tried to keep the jealousy off my face when you were talking about walking in and being able to turn into the dressing rooms. And I imagine as well that one of the capstones of that is pulling on the jersey, Old Firm game, winning the Old Firm game.
Mm-hmm.
And was that just, you're in a unique position, you've played in a big derby before in terms of Merseyside. I'm not entirely convinced. I mean, I'm not obviously a player, so I'll go with somebody else's experience here, but I don't think they're naturally comparable.
Yeah, and everybody asks you that, or asks me that, because I've played in Hearts, Hibs, Liverpool, Everton, and obviously Rangers and Celtic. What's the biggest? And there's no comparison. Rangers Celtic's the biggest, in my opinion. Obviously, and maybe because of my background, it is the biggest game. And my experience was the more you played in it, the bigger game it got. So the first one we played at Celtic Park, when Ugo, God rest his soul, scored the goal. It was surreal, because it was just you didn't know what to expect, and then you just kind of, and it's a wow factor associated with it. And then every game, in my experience, just gets more and more tension associated with it. It means more. It's the build-up's longer. What it means to use bigger. So that was kind of how it worked for me. It just felt like every one I played in got more significant and more important. And I enjoyed that. Don't get me wrong, I was nervous and worried about the games as you got older, and what could go wrong and things like that. But that kind of feeling you had, the stress going into it and the elation after it, if it turned out to be great, was was not experiences you get in many other kind of walks of life or other jobs or pastimes.
I can only imagine, and respects to Ugo Ehiogu as well there. So we go into 2008, and I think you touched on it as well. There were some players in the squads when you've come in before that obviously needed turned over, shall we say, and the culture and the belief of the squad probably needed raised up. People like yourself in there helping with that type of thing. You go to, you start with the Champions League run obviously beforehand, and I'm just wondering, what's the standout game for you in the group stages of that? And I'm thinking of one in particular, but I'm keen to, from your side in the dressing room, when did things start to become really real in that Champions League run before getting into the Europa League one?
It never became real, to be honest. It was such a weird experience. The games obviously stood alone on their own 2 feet. The draw was crazy in terms of the teams we got, in terms of the quality of the teams we were playing against, and it genuinely probably couldn't have been any tougher. But we were also a good team, and Walter's top manager, so he knows how to set up our team to give us the best chance. So we weren't given much hope, and we started really, really well. And it's hard to pick a game. You beat Lyon 3-0 in Lyon. That's an incredible result. You draw with Barcelona at Ibrox, although probably never got out of our own half. And Stuttgart, 2 amazing games, and then you lose the last game to Lyon, and Benzema just is on a different planet. So there's so many memories. It's hard to say this game, because they're all fantastic experiences. And at the time you just try and do your best. But when you get to my age, you start looking back, and we actually had the jerseys out with my kids that know that long ago, and you see the jerseys you've swapped, and you remember the games and things like that, and you go, wow, that was special. So they were all great memories, and no one stands out any more than others. Playing in the Nou Camp was crazy. Playing against Messi and Ronaldinho and Thierry Henry and people like that, and getting your family able to go and watch the game, and the Rangers fans get to go to games like that as well. That's special, obviously, but that whole season was special in terms of, even going to Bremen and Lisbon and Fiorentina and places like that, and then Manchester as well as all the Rangers Celtic games and all the other tough games you have. So it just was every game was an adventure, and it was just a cumulative thing that, what a season, what a roller coaster ride, and very, very close we were to being the best Rangers team ever in terms of potentially winning a treble and a European trophy, just falling short, and at the end, unfortunately, not getting much help for our institutions probably, but that's another story. So
yeah, I might pick up a question on that one before this interview is over. So I suppose I'm just interested, and it's a night it's a day that will live long in the memory for someone my age. I was very lucky enough to be in the stadium in Manchester that day. Although it wasn't the result we wanted, I got to see Rangers in a European final. It will live with me for the rest of my life. But I'm just really keen to understand. You go to places like Bremen, you go to Lisbon and stuff like that, and it seemed to be underdog, and then at some point there's, oh my God, if Nacho sticks this penalty away against Fiorentina, that's us. Vieri's not been able to do his job. We're going to a UEFA Cup final, and there must have been a moment within the dressing room where it all got real for everybody, that you've got your chance to do this. And for some players, and I appreciate you played in Scotland jersey World Cups, you've played in the Premiership, but even for you, that must have been, this is arguably the biggest moment that anybody will face.
You know what? It wasn't like that. I genuinely think because we were so wrapped up in the league, and obviously there was cup competitions and the European thing. I'm not saying it wasn't important, but it wasn't the real focus. It was almost like a bonus. And even initially when we went to Greece, we were thinking this wouldn't be the end of the world if we got knocked out here because we want to win the league. That's kind of how we were. And we just kept progressing through. And as you said, we were never favourites, and the games were always difficult. But we just managed to sneak through. And even in the semi-final, I don't think it was until after the game we actually realised, like, Jesus, we're in the final here. It kind of crept up on us. It was genuinely that's how I felt, and that's my memories of it. There was some great games along the way, and as you say, you probably think, right, you're going to Bremen, this is going to be difficult, this might be the end, or you're going to Florence and you're thinking, this is going to be really difficult, there's some good players, in Lisbon, and various other games along the journey. So I think it was very, very late, as you say, maybe when that's just stepping up to take the penalty, you're going, you know what, we've got a wee chance here. That's kind of how it was, and that's no underselling it. That's just genuinely how that group was. I don't think we got too high or too wrapped up in what might happen, and just kind of tried to stay in the moment and tried to concentrate on what our roles and our jobs were. And we never got any credit during that run. We were criticised a lot in terms of the way we played, and even in the final, I think from memory, we were a good hour into the game. It was 0-0, and it could have went either way. And we weren't playing particularly well, but we never played well all season in that competition. So it wasn't worrying us, and it was such a fine line between success and failure. And up to that point, we'd came out on the right side of it, and ultimately in the final we didn't, which is a massive disappointment. But we were probably due one, to be honest, in terms of in a one-off game against a really, really good team. They beat Bayern Munich in the semi-final. They weren't bad at all, some of the players that played in that team. So it was a disappointment, but it was an unbelievable journey. But it crept up to us. That was my feeling.
Zenit were a decent crowd. I'm not going to dwell on the final or anything like that. Like you said, it didn't go for us, and we move on. I'm interested though to know what the feelings were with the lack of help from, let's say, our governing bodies, and what it looked like actually actively going out their way to not give any help other than just being incompetent. Did that filter into the team?
It was disappointing, I think, and we tried to use it as motivation. It became obvious quite quickly that we weren't going to get a great deal of help, and we weren't going to get dispensation to actually get time to recover and prepare and be in the best condition, both for the European games and the domestic games. So it became a bit of a race at the end and a bit of a treadmill, and that was difficult. That's not the reason it never happened. We ultimately weren't good enough in the games. What had gone on and about it, we couldn't affect, and we just tried to use it as motivation to try and be as successful as we could. And even after losing the cup final, the UEFA Cup final, and no win in the league, and then having to play in a cup final like a couple of days later, that was really, really difficult. And then we go 2-0 up, and then Queen of the South come back and it's 2-2, and you think, here we go. So that team to get a win out of that game, that says a lot, because the boys were basically running on fumes at that stage, and it was a crazy season for a lot of reasons. But ultimately, to end it as winners, regardless who you're playing against, regardless of the competition, but to pick a trophy up at the end or another trophy up at the end was, made it all worthwhile. Although it wasn't what ideally we wanted, it was at least something.
Yeah, I think that year will always be remembered fondly by the support, though, even as you say. But we didn't win everything we wanted. But what a ride that journey was. And so, just cycling into a couple of specific games now that I'm really interested in, and I'm very conscious of your time as well, David. So we'll look to wrap up. But I'm really, really interested to get your knowledge and your comments on that St Mirren final, where you've got two men sent off. Surely in your mind, or in the dressing room, was it always, or in the team I should say, was it always, we can still beat this mob? Or was it a case of, we'll be doing well to get out of here with anything?
My memory, and this is the genuine truth, is during the game, like, we played in a lot of cup finals, and we didn't play well in many of the cup finals. Genuinely, I don't think that they were our best performances, and it was the same in that game against it. Man, they were the better team, and I thought the best thing that happened to us was getting a player sent off. I thought we actually got better in the game as they got, because all of a sudden we went from them probably playing with no fear and thinking, well, if we win it, it's a bonus, to us playing thinking we've got to win this game. If we don't win this game, it's a disaster. And then all of a sudden, the emphasis switched to them. We get the players sent off, and all of a sudden they're going, "Oh no, we've got to win this game. We should win this game now." And then we went to 9 men, and then that definitely swung in their favour. And all of a sudden they're going, "We need to win this game. We should win this game," and that took the pressure off us. And that's very unusual for a Rangers team in a cup final. And I'll never forget Walter coming on the touchline, because Walter didn't come on the touchline a lot. He came on the touchline, the jacket's off, and you're thinking, all right, what a game this is, what an opportunity this is to win. You know, a game where you're not expected to win. You can just imagine what's going to be written about you and run about the game. And also for the lads that have been sent off, they're in the dressing room feeling terrible, thinking, you know, we might have cost Rangers the cup and, you know, a successful season, and it'll have a real impact on our season. So there was also a feeling of trying to help them out a bit as well, and that was part of the process as well. So I felt we got better as the game went on, as we got less players, and that might be just my memory playing tricks on me. But within the game, after we scored the goal, which was a great goal, then I never felt really like we were going to lose it. That was my genuine feeling on the pitch. It might not look like that to you or where you were sitting, but that was my feeling. I felt really confident. Scoring the goal was always the hardest thing. That was the hardest thing, but it was a great counter-attacking goal with Nazy and Kenny Miller. And the game just kind of fell into our hands, and we took the opportunity as it came. And St Mirren, I'm sure, although they've won cup finals, so it'll not be the end of the world for them, but that was a real opportunity missed for them.
I think when you see the goal hitting the back of the net, or the ball hitting the back of the net, I should say, I think their players just lost any belief that was still in them, because I think they had to get the first goal, and then that'd have been it. But you know, us doing it, I'm just keenly interested as well. 2011 League Cup final against, it's an Old Firm Cup final. You'd spoken about playing in the Old Firms and what they mean, but it must be absolutely surreal to be a winning cup finalist in those types of games, because they've got so much extra on top of them.
Yeah, definitely. And that one in particular, for memory for me, I mean, I'm 41 at the time, so I'm on my last legs, genuinely am. So I'm thinking this might be my last one. And I was getting written off as I was every year, but my memory is especially that cup final. So I'm thinking, right, we need to win this game. We really need to win this game. So I'd probably put myself personally under more pressure to win that game as well. So that was a real relief to win that one. And the cup finals are unbelievable. There's no other game like it in the world when there's 50% Rangers, 50% Celtic. And Hampden, in my opinion, it's not the best stadium in the world, but 50-50 Rangers Celtic, what an atmosphere, what an environment, what a game to walk out in. And then obviously to win it, you win it, you go and pick up the trophy, and there's one half of the stadium's full, one half of the stadium's empty. It's a really surreal experience. But that game itself was probably in my career one of the most pressure I put myself under, to win a game and being desperate to win a game. And that's kind of my memory of that game. I can't remember too much about the details, to be honest, in terms of how the game went. I remember the start of the game, and I remember the end of the game. And I remember feeling at the end and lifting the cup, obviously, and what that meant. But it just, just personally putting yourself under pressure to try and be successful, and knowing what the game meant, both to your club, but also you individually and your family and all the rest of it, was a really special feeling when that final whistle went and you managed to win it.
Just interesting there. I remember, every year there would be some column in a newspaper or several saying, well, this will be David Weir. David Weir will get absolutely shown up this time. He'll get run rings round. His legs have gone and all that, and you're still winning trophies at that, 40-41. So if I press the fast forward button again, then really quickly, you've went out of the club. What's it like coming back though when you're assistant manager? I mean, I'm really interested. I spoke to Mark Warburton a couple of months ago and did an interview with him, but interested to get your view on some of that.
I was excited. I know I'd been at the playoff game against Motherwell. I did the TV for BT for the Motherwell game, so I seen that game, and it was obviously really disappointing for Rangers. So I knew Rangers were in a bit of crisis. It wasn't great, and it was a difficult time. So when Mark got offered the job, then I thought it was a really exciting prospect. I knew there was a lot of work had to be done, but also knew what potentially Rangers could be. Also knew where they were, because I've seen that game and others. But I knew there was a lot of work to be done. But knowing Mark, I knew he would do the work, and I knew he would, he'd go into it with his eyes open, and he was capable of doing it. So I thought it was really, really exciting. And when Mark decided to take the job, obviously I wanted to support him and I wanted to help him, and I tried to give him as much information as I could about what I knew and what I thought would help us. And I was just really, really excited at the chance of building something. And I knew we were a long way away from where we wanted to be, particularly in terms of catching Celtic and and what they'd done in the meantime and where Rangers had been. So, but ultimately overall it was exciting. I was getting an opportunity to go back to Rangers after having a great time there in the past.
Yeah, like I said, I'd spoken to Mark, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn there when I say I think he was still surprised by the level of commentary, let's say, round about Rangers and the management and the team and all that, particularly when things didn't go exactly to plan. So when you come back up into the Premier League, we get to the cup final though. We get the cup final against Hibs, and I know that's before we come back up, but he'd been mentioning that he was looking about the squad in the hotel the night before the game, and yes, they were calm, but once they got out on the pitch, he felt that squad was running on fumes as well. Yeah. And that's quite an interesting. It was an interesting kind of commentary from him on that, and certainly some of the listeners had come back to me and said, "Well, why wasn't that freshened up then?" And so, realising that the squad's only so big and you've only got so many starters. Was that something you were feeling as well, that when you're watching them, these boys are running out of fumes?
Oh, I wouldn't say running out of fumes. I mean, I thought, and Hibs deserve to win the game on the day, in my opinion. And a cup final can be like that. I've played in lots of cup finals with Rangers, and it's very fine lines. And ultimately, you've got to find a way to win the game. That's how it goes, and there'll be to and fro within the game. And there was within that game, and the problem for us going into the game was we had 3-week break between the end of the season and the cup final. That was a problem for us. So we had to try and manage that time and try and remain as competitive and ready for that game as we could. Hibs were still playing in the playoffs, which ultimately they didn't. They weren't successful. And so that was a real negative for them. That was a real hammer blow for them. So you've got to give them credit for reacting for that as well. But we had that period of time where we couldn't really get any games. Everybody in England was still playing. The Scottish teams, it's difficult. The Premier League were still playing, so you couldn't really get opposition. We had to go to Tottenham and play like a reserve team almost, which wasn't quite the right thing, but that was only part of it. Ultimately, on the day, we never played well. What are the reasons? Whether we were running on fumes, whether we weren't prepared enough, whether we just weren't good enough, I don't know. But it was incredibly disappointing the way we lost it. Obviously, in the last 10 minutes to lose 2 goals to set pieces, which is something that you should have a degree of control over, and always makes it that much worse. There's never a good way to lose a cup final, and it was a real disappointment. Your last game of the season after a really exciting season, a really good season, to end it on a low was really disappointing. But it's how you react, and you've got to try and react positively, and you've got to deal with it, and you've got to take the criticism that comes your way.
Yeah, and a lot's been written and spoken about when came back up into the Premier League and going for 55 and the banners and the expectations and weight on you guys as well, and then some of the signings which maybe didn't quite make complete sense to the support. I'm keen though you get to that stage where it's not working. Or rather, the plan doesn't seem to be working, and I appreciate that there was a plan to go year on year to get closer and closer. And Celtic, for example, had spent a lot of money as well and moved further. But in terms of it coming towards an end, was that an expectation, or because obviously a lot was written at the time when you guys were no longer managing the club? Does that leave a bitter taste in the mouth, or was it just all very surprising considering a plan had been sold to the board and the plan was we need to do a couple of year cycle?
Yeah, but I mean, I'm never surprised when in football. Genuinely, I'm not, and I didn't feel it was coming to an end. I think Mark and I work together at different clubs, and we'll always try and do the right thing. And undoubtedly, we made mistakes, and we talk about signings, but you go into the signings with the right intentions. And with some of the signings, our intention was to get some experience, get a degree of toughness about the team because we felt we needed that. We felt we were lacking a wee bit in that in terms of stepping up. But ultimately, the biggest difference was Celtic. The Celtic team we played in the semi-final and the Celtic team that were in the league were two different teams. They were completely different proposition. Brendan had revitalised them. He turned players who were performing averagely into very, very good players very quickly. So all of a sudden, Celtic had set the bar really, really high. And we had made some good signings, which get forgotten, some signings which never worked, which is always the case. But we had a really high bar to catch, and Rangers fans' expectation is to win the league. And whether that's because of the banners or not, that's always the expectations. I've talked about my career. When I came to Rangers, that's you've got to deal with that. That's not going to change. So we didn't deal with it well enough, or the club didn't deal with it well enough. And ultimately, my genuine belief is we would finish second in the season, in the league that season. And I would still argue with Andy on that. And I felt that's where we should finish that season. What the gap was a big number with Celtic, and I get that. I understand why people would be upset with that, but I'm not sure we could have done a great deal more on that in terms of how good they were. They were undefeated. They had some really, really good players, and they had a level of consistency that had started what they've done for the last 3 or 4 years, I feel. So that momentum that they gained has kept going, and we never quite got that momentum. We were very stop and start, and we had to change the team again. There's no doubt about that. We'd had some issues and things hadn't quite worked out as we'd planned, but we'd gone in with the right intentions. It hadn't worked, so we had to adjust to that. And it never really got to that stage because, there was a decision made to make a change. And that's football. That's what happens. When you're in management, as a coach, a manager, whatever, that's what happens. And it's happened to me before at clubs, and I'm sure it will happen to me again. And I think all managers are understanding of that. But as we said previously, getting time at a football club is fundamental. Steven Gerrard looks like he's getting time. He's not had any trophies in his first couple of years, but you can see this progression. Is it where the Rangers fans want to be? Probably not. But you can see it's going in the right direction, and it looks like he's getting the time to build a team and a method and a kind of stability within the club that will enable success, because success takes time. And you don't always get that in football, and understand that, because there's a lot of noises outside, and especially in Scotland, and it's doubly especially in Glasgow. But what, things happen, you move on. I'm a Rangers fan. I wouldn't change it for the world, both in terms of coaching and playing, and I wish the club success. I wish it had ended better, but it didn't. So you know what, move on. It is what it is. You can't change the past, but you can, hopefully you can affect the future a wee bit, and hopefully Rangers get back to winning leagues and winning cups, and some of the players that are there now will get some of the great memories that I've had personally as well, both as a coach and as a player.
Yeah, I think we can all absolutely get behind that. And like I said, I don't want to dwell on that particular part, but just one question on it. Mm-hmm. Do you think there could have been a clearer message from the club in terms of, because I remember there being a lot of discussion in the back pages, let's say, of who had walked, what you guys had wanted, and I feel that the message was slightly mixed in terms of, did you guys give up and want to go somewhere else versus no, we want to be here?
We never gave up. That's just not like, I never resigned. Why would I resign for Rangers? That's incredible. And like, so why do we believe that? It's done and dusted. It's in the past. Like, we never resigned. Why would we resign? The first I was out for dinner with Lee McCulloch, and I get an email or get a call from Mark saying, I've just received an email saying I've resigned. And that was my introduction. I went home, I turned on Sky, and it says Mark Warburton's resigned as Rangers manager. And if you resign, there's a letter or there's a conversation or there's there's some instance where you resign. How can you? I've never seen that, and I've certainly never done it or wrote it or sent it. So it just didn't happen. So I'm not sure why it was played out that way, but it was. And ultimately, you can go to court and you can make a bigger deal with it, or as I said, you can draw a line in the sand and say, look, you know what, it is what it is. Let's move on and see what happens next.
Well, taking that as good advice. I'll move on, and final couple of questions from me, David, because you've been more than generous with your time. It has to be said.
So battery's running out my laptop here, so it might.
Right. Well, that's a good warning for me. I'll definitely get to it then. But I'm just the season's kicked off, and so we've got a 1-0 win at Pittodrie just the other day. I don't know if you watched the game or anything.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just wondering from your perspective, and I'll ask you about performance of the team and all that. But you would have been about Brighton. I'm wondering, seeing Connor Goldson and Leon Balogun in there, certainly Balogun looks like a really good pickup from Wigan for a free. Did they start to look like a centre-back pairing that you could, what's your opinions of that?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a good mix. I mean, Leon was in my group last season in terms of a loan player from Brighton, so I saw a lot of Leon at Wigan, and they transferred their season. And people will say, oh, Wigan aren't a big club and Rangers are a bigger club, but Leon transformed in their season. He kept them up, in my opinion. He just settled the whole team down. And, I saw that, and he's got a great reputation at Brighton as well in terms of a person and a player. So I think he's a really, really good fit for Rangers in terms of his attributes and him as a person. I think he'll calm people down round about him, which is obviously really important at Rangers a lot of the time. So I watched the game. I thought he did really well. I think it was a really brave decision to play him, and I think ultimately it was the right decision. He's been playing. He's obviously confident. The manager got a good feel for him when he's came into the building, and I think the team looked solid. I've got to be honest. It looked like a really easy win for Rangers at Aberdeen. Comfortable, although it was 1-0. I felt they were comfortable in the game, really comfortable. There's a chance for Aberdeen towards the end, obviously. And, when you're 1-0, you can always lose the game. But it's very unusual to go up there and get a game like that where you're so much in control. So I thought that was really positive. And I think Leon was part of that. But I thought the whole team were pretty strong, were pretty consistent in how they played. And I think they set a good marker down for the remainder of the season. And I think Leon and Connor will be, along with the competition, will be, there's some good opportunities and some good pairings in there, and I'm sure there'll be a few twists and turns throughout the season, but Leon will definitely contribute, no doubt.
Yeah, I agree with all that, and I thought it was a pretty routine one as well. I always get the feeling that there's a couple of extra gears that they could have moved into if they were under pressure, but there was no pressure from Aberdeen really, missing obviously their two main strikers through injury. So final question then, because I said I would get to it. I know you're doing work with obviously the loan players at Brighton. You've referenced that a couple of times, but can we expect to see David Weir back on the touchline sometime soon?
I would never say never. Genuinely, I wouldn't. But I love the role I'm doing. I love the club I'm at. It's a really good club. It's a really stable club. I like the culture of the club. I work with Dan Ashworth, who's the sporting director, who gives me responsibility to get on my role, and I'm really involved with the players. We've got good players, so they're playing at a good level. They're young players, which I enjoy working with young players. I enjoy trying to help young players, and it ticks a lot of boxes in terms of where I am right now in my life. Will I ever be a coach or a manager or involved at that level again? I really don't know. I may well be. It's no eating me up inside. I'm not desperate to go do it because I genuinely enjoy doing what I'm doing. I enjoy my work-life balance, and enjoy the sort of pressure I put on myself to be good at what I do. So I don't know if I really answered your question there, but that's kind of where I'm at. So I wouldn't rule it out, definitely not, because I love football and I love being involved. But what that actual role is, who knows? And football changes very quickly, as we've discussed, on numerous occasions here through this conversation. So who knows what's next and when that will be.
Well, we look forward to seeing whatever that ends up looking like. And it falls to me then to say, this is Ibrox. I'll be Tommy McIntyre, and from a classy centre back to a classy interviewee, David, thank you so much for your time.
No, I really enjoyed it. Thanks very much, and thanks for asking me on.